Welcome everyone to Law&Crime Daily. I'm Brian Bachmeyer. More than 6 years after police started investigating That 70s Show star Danny Masterson, a jury found the actor guilty of forcible rape. Masterson was handcuffed inside a Los Angeles courtroom as his wife, who has stood by his side for the entire investigation, gasped and sobbed. Masterson was first tried last fall when jurors couldn't come to an agreement about what happened in the actor's Hollywood Hills home between 2001 and 2003. That's where multiple victims claim Masterson drugged and raped them. Prosecutors vowed to bring charges a second time, and a retrial got underway in the spring. This time around, the judge allowed the witnesses to say they were drugged, despite no forensic evidence of drugs being presented, and the Church of Scientology featured more heavily in the retrial. It took the jury 7 days of deliberation to reach their decision. Masterson has been free on bail since he was first charged, but will now be locked up until his sentencing. That date has not been announced yet, but a post-trial hearing is planned for August. Masterson's accusers are also suing him and the church in civil court. The jury in this second trial did a major flip-flop from the first trial, basically coming to the opposite conclusions. When the jury was polled following the mistrial, this was the breakdown. 2 jurors voted to convict on count 1, with 10 saying not guilty. On count 2, 4 jurors voted to convict, and the third count had the most in favor of a guilty verdict, but still only just 5 of the 12. In the retrial, the jury convicted on 2 of the 3 counts and voted 8-4 in favor of conviction on the third rape charge. One of the women whose accusations led to Masterson's guilty verdict released a statement Wednesday. She said, "I am experiencing a complex array of emotions, relief, exhaustion, strength, sadness, knowing that my abuser, Danny Masterson, will face accountability for his criminal behavior." The charge connected to Masterson's ex-girlfriend led to a jury deadlock. She said in a statement, "While I'm encouraged that Danny Masterson will face some criminal punishment, I am devastated that he has dodged criminal accountability for his heinous conduct against me." I'm joined now by my co-host, former trial attorney Terry Austin, and today's special guest, former federal prosecutor Nima Rahmani. Terry, the jury did not convict Masterson of rape in connection with his longtime ex-girlfriend. Why do you think they came to that conclusion, and what are your thoughts about the vote count in this second trial?
Well, I think it's interesting the fact that in the first trial they had so many acquittal votes, and in the second trial they had more people who were voting guilty. And in fact, obviously, 2 of those counts they received conviction. So I think the evidence that went in the second trial had a big difference, and it certainly was some of that drug evidence, some of the evidence as far as Scientology. I think they did not convict as far as the ex-girlfriend, which was that third count, because I think she had been with him and they had some questions as to whether or not that actually was sexual assault.
Yeah, Nima, the judge allowed evidence about drugs during the second trial, but not during the first. A bit of a change there. Could that be a legitimate ground for an appeal?
It could be, Brian, but I think the judge made the right decision. Ultimately, any witness can testify and establish any fact. You don't need corroborating evidence. You don't need a blood test. You don't need a medical report to say that you were drugged. If you believe that you're under the influence of drugs and that lay witness can lay the foundation, that's enough. So obviously, we know Masterson's lawyers are going to appeal. We should get that notice of appeal any day now. But I think the judge made the right decision, and I expect this verdict to stand on appeal.
Yeah, I'm going to be interested to see what their arguments are and how that appeal is either denied or granted. We'll, of course, follow the story for you. The one-time game show contestant charged with his wife's brutal murder is facing a potential life sentence after a jury took only 4 hours to determine his guilt.
We, the jury, find the defendant, Timothy Bleepnic, guilty of home invasion signed by the 4-person and 11 jurors.
Tim Bleepnic is being held without bond until his sentencing in August. Evidence during the trial showed Becky Bleepnic was becoming more and more scared of her husband, Tim, as the two went through a bitter divorce. She believed he would do anything to get sole custody of their 3 sons. The prosecution says Bleepnic broke into his wife's home and shot her 14 times. The jury agreed. Becky Bleepnic's sister gave a statement after the verdict.
We should not have to suffer a life without Becky. Becky was robbed of her life in the most hateful, cowardly, and cruel way. Her boys were robbed of a loving and devoted mother. I was robbed of my sister and best friend. My parents were robbed of their daughter, and as a parent myself, I cannot imagine a greater torture. The judicial process cannot bring her back, nor can it heal our wounds, but we are relieved that the verdict delivers justice, and we are thankful for all who made it a reality.
Welcome back to Law&Crime Daily. Our coverage of the jury's decision in actor Danny Masterson's rape trial continues. Prosecutors secured a conviction their second time around. The first trial ended in a mistrial on all charges, but on Wednesday, 12 jurors found Masterson guilty on 2 counts of rape. They cannot reach a decision on a third count, which was connected to Masterson's ex-girlfriend. Masterson and his accusers were all members of the Church of Scientology. During the retrial, the judge allowed church policy to play a larger role, with a former official even testifying about church policy. But other witnesses testify that current church members had intimidated them, trying to convince them not to testify or to lie. The Church of Scientology released a statement after the verdict saying, in part, the church has no policy prohibiting or discouraging members from reporting criminal conduct of anyone, Scientologists or not, to law enforcement. Quite the opposite. Church policy explicitly demands Scientologists abide by laws of the land. We caught up with Tony Ortega, a reporter who has covered the church for decades, to get his take on the impact from the trial.
There was a lot more Scientology content during this retrial, and there's just no question Scientology looked terrible in this thing. I mean, Danny Masterson had received protection from the church. These women had been punished for being victims, which was, right in line with the way Scientology thinks about those kind of things. These women were told they should not go to the police. I know Scientology has put out a statement saying that's all lies, but it's right there in black and white in their book, telling members that they can't go to civil authorities, that they have to keep things inside. So, I think although Scientology was not technically a party in this criminal case, this was a disaster for the Church of Scientology. I've talked to literally hundreds of ex-Scientologists, and they all will tell you that that's where they were trained, that everything is to be kept in-house with the Scientology's own justice procedures. This is not something that, it just came up lately. I mean, this is something that's a bedrock principle of Scientology. And I know that they claim it's not true, but Scientology lies. I mean, it's just one of the key features of the leadership of Scientology. You will not get the truth from them.
Church of Scientology PR team is working overtime. Nima, the judge said that the Scientology Church, or the Church of Scientology, sorry, was not on trial in this case, but do you think it played a large role in the outcome?
It did, Brian, and although technically they weren't on trial, it was a huge issue here, and really the defense opened the door. They said that there was no contemporaneous report. This was all fabricated, and of course, that allowed the prosecution to argue that it was the church that covered all this up and discouraged these victims from coming forward. That's why all that evidence came in, and it was a terrible look for the church. They tried to litigate, prevent this evidence from coming in, and they were unsuccessful. And I think ultimately one of the biggest losers here, aside from Danny Masterson, of course, was the Church of Scientology. Yeah, and we'll see how that goes for them. Terry, several of Masterson's accusers have filed a lawsuit against him and the Church of Scientology. What's going on with that?
That's right, Brian. Now there is this civil lawsuit, and they sued Masterson, but they also sued the Church of Scientology, and they sued its leader. So this is a big case. They're saying that there was, my favorite, cause of action, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and it's been filed since a couple of years ago, so 2019. It's in California, and they've asked for a jury, and they are asking for unspecified damages. So because the church is involved, I think they have an opportunity here to have a big win. And all of the plaintiffs include the plaintiffs or the individuals who were in the criminal trial, and also it includes the husband of one of those accusers. So there are a lot of plaintiffs, a lot of defendants. I think it's going to take some time to go through the system, but I think at the end of the day we're going to see probably a judgment in high numbers.
That is your favorite claim. I got to find my favorite criminal charge. I'll work on it. Another Hollywood actor will not face charges of sexual assault after an investigation by Los Angeles police. Armie Hammer, who gained fame in movies like The Social Network and Call Me By Your Name, says he's glad his name has been cleared. In 2021, a woman accused Hammer of raping her in 2017. Hammer maintained that any sexual contact would have been consensual, but the accusation prompted an investigation. The district attorney's office released a statement saying they were unable to prove the case beyond a reasonable doubt because of insufficient evidence.